John Fithian, as Steve was like alluding to, he basically spoke out on Tuesday at CinemaCon, basically just announcing that the same day business model that we saw throughout a little bit in 2020, but majority of 2021 is officially just dead. A model that we talked about extensively here on Sleepless with Steve at the start of the year of 2021. A model that we thought was the smart move to do when it came to the whole idea of, well, theaters are open, but, there is a virus out there. And what ultimately ended up happening was that you had people either not going to the theater to watch something, because, it's funny that this then came out around the same time HBO finally released like their numbers for all the movies that came out in 2021 and how much they like were streamed overall and everything. And you look at how many households streamed The Suicide Squad compared to going to see it in theaters. You're like, well, there's your answer. That's why that movie didn't make any damn money. But basically, yeah, they basically announced that model is officially dead, and what killed it was piracy, because, it's existing on the internet. It's something that you can easily pirate and everything, as Dom smirks and squints his eyes suspiciously. But yeah, it basically goes into that, and talking about how, like, if a major title that people are clamoring to see is in theaters, to see in theaters is released too quickly to home and then pirated, the temptation to stay home and watch a pirated film becomes greater for many potential moviegoers. And, to give credit, that is true, but it's just like, depending on how good your movie is, I still feel like you can make money. That's either near or that could be debated on a whole other thing. He talks about how blockbusters are keystones of this industry, and we have a great slate of big movies, and that's why, essentially why they're not doing the same day model anymore. They really want to just rebuild box office revenue with the amount of blockbusters we have lined up this year. And if you go to, IMDb, you go to Coming Soon, and you look at the amount of, like, actual, like, big studio movies we're getting this year compared to last year, it makes sense. I mean, hell, we started with Batman in March. Back in March of 2021, we didn't have anything. Like, it was just like, it was a barren wasteland. It took until May, where Quiet Place Part 2 was kind of like the first big, all right, here we go. We're back in theaters now. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for right now. Dom, do you want to, like, jump in? Because I know you're probably chomping at the bit right now, wanting to say something to the CEO.
Oh, boy.
No, hey, like that. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Just that pirating and illegal streaming, all that stuff, that's always going to be the scapegoat for any major media corporation, no matter what. Literally anything, movies, TV, video games. I'm not going to say that people who torrent are the working class heroes of the person trying to of all people trying to consume art. Anyway, the list of movies that they show here in the Variety article is actually a little. I don't think, is it a comprehensive?
It doesn't go into, like, you don't see Dune on here. It doesn't go into the later
That's
releases,
what I thought.
like the end of the year that we got. Like, because there's no.
Oh no, I think
Yeah,
the second page is Dune.
Oh, it is?
Second page? Oh, wow. Look at that.
Oh, there is a second. Okay. Okay, because I was going to say, I was like, they're missing King Richard. They're missing Clifford. Okay, they're really not.
It actually feels shorter than I thought it'd be.
Dude,
this
right?
can't be comprehensive.
No, even when I looked at
the
even when I looked at that list, like, just the first page, I was just like, man, I feel like we had way more, like, at-home releases than we actually did.
Honestly, I think this is honestly comprehensive, though, because you got to think, these are movies that came out the day and date, same time in theaters as they did on streaming, and
didn't get delayed.
HBO Max makes up the bulk of this. No, I think this is accurate. I really do, because I'm struggling to think. They even got Marry Me on there, which is one even I forget that Marry Me did do the day and date thing. And Firestarter next month is going to be, I think, probably, unless Universal is going to keep that up, Firestarter is going to Peacock as well the same day it comes to theaters. But I also think it's more of a limited release.
Yeah,
so yeah, this is comprehensive.
This was never going to last. This was an emergency measure spurred on by a once in a lifetime events. But you know, they're missing too much of their money.
It was
way too much of their money.
We even said this when we talked about this at first. Either way, this is a great way to boost your streaming service numbers, and it did wonders for HBO Max. I mean, like a lot of we saw like how many people viewed. The Batman. Hell, Mortal Kombat, 4.5 million viewers. Like, Jesus.
That's too much. That's too much.
Like, we saw that, like, yeah, it boosted numbers greatly during a time where people were stuck at home and had nothing to watch. So, all power to them for, at least going through with that, especially Warner Bros. At the end of the day, I'll say this. Warner Bros. Put a lot out there compared to every other studio. They really took a whole entire year's worth of movies that they could have just, like, kept waiting on and said, screw it. Like, we'll actually just put it out there.
And they did not, and give them credit, they did not pull the slick Rick on any of these with like the Matrix, like, because even like when the Matrix came out in December, the landscape was a little bit better. A lot of the boosters were available. People were, getting vaccinated in mass. By that point, a lot of people were already vaccinated and movie theaters were reopened. They could have easily reneged on that. But honestly, they did keep their promise that like all of these movies will come to HBO Max.
And as of now,
I give them credit for that, doing that, because, and we said this too, even talking about this, that piracy was going to be the thing that's going to screw this up. because if you know anything about like piracy, how it works, if you've done it, or like if you've like read about it and stuff, what happens when movies come to theaters. It takes a while before there's like a clean rip of the movie online. A lot of it is still the camcorder crap. That is still an actual thing. But when a movie comes to a streaming service, I don't care what kind of protection they have. It's a video online. It's able to be copied. You get a 1080p rip of that movie the second it drops. The movie drops at midnight in your local area. An hour later, it's probably on the piracy sites in full quality, in full streaming quality. When a movie goes to theaters, it's a lot harder to get a clean quality rip of it.
Yeah. I mean, even then, like, even now, I should say, they're sticking to their promise about the whole 45-day window thing, just like Paramount's doing as well. Like, Paramount just announced that Sonic 2 will be coming to, Paramount Plus on May, 21st. And Warner Bros. Is doing the exact same thing. Like, they just added the Batman onto HBO Max. And they're going to do the same with the rest of their catalog they have lined up this year, where it's like, after 45 days, we'll put it on here. Because, they're at least, like, I think that's like a better way of doing it now, as we're like, people are getting boosters and, hopefully levels stay down and everything. It's just like, hey, it's out in theaters right now. You can go see it. But, if you're still a little bit like, hesitant, stick with our subscription. It'll be on here before you know it.
And I keep going back to this. Every time we bring up the day and date release, I always go back to like the now kind of forgotten, not by us, but the forgotten stories of like movies that tested this like 10 years ago, or, whatever it was, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Like, I mean, there's obviously the famous, we've brought it up on this show, I swear to God, it's more than once keeping it alive, the story of Tower Heist. And that what they try to do with that thing of all movies. It's funny. It's always the least suspecting movie. And then you had Paranormal Activity, the Ghost Dimension, and Trolls, obviously for the COVID era. And then you had Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse as well, that pissed AMC off so bad they didn't even show either that or Paranormal Activity, the Ghost Dimension. That's why when you go back and you look at like if you're a big nerd and you're on Wikipedia and you look at like the box office gross of the Paranormal Activity movies, there's a huge dip with the Ghost Dimension, and you're like, man, this thing didn't do well. And then you remember it's like, oh yeah, AMC like planted their foot and said they weren't going to carry that nor Scout's Guide when they were going to do that. Like when it waned down in theater count, they were going to put it on streaming, to rent. The experimental ways the studios tried to go about this. And then like most change is ultimately happens when people are forced into it, by a cataclysmic circumstance, even though nobody could have foresaw a worldwide pandemic.
Forced evolution. And we are now seeing, not just in movies and even media, we're seeing it everywhere, where it's like the pandemic really forced us, and for a while, for a few harrowing months, conditioned us one way into a new landscape. We got a real taste of that stuff, of whatever that was, whether it was the workplace, whether it was, God, I can't imagine there's going to be literal volumes of dissertations about how the pandemic affected children and how it affected their school life. I can't imagine being a kid during this time, even now. But in the world of movies in particular, we're now seeing kind of the reaction, or the kind of the slide backwards. Maybe that's putting it too one way or the other. Maybe a charged word there, but you know what I mean. It's coming back to the way things were. The real question now, this particular story was always going to be an inevitability. The question is, by how much will anything stay behind? What will the consumer market crave through their dollar? That's also happening with stuff like streaming services. Netflix is the poster child for this, of like, yeah, let's just keep shooting ourselves in the foot. Let's see how much infinite growth we can sustain by doing worse things for ourselves. So it's all coming to a head. This is honestly, this is like the heart of our show. This is like,
it is.
It's the ongoing story. If anything, if Sleepless with Steve, the revival, means anything else to anyone at any point in time, it's this ongoing thing, and we will diligently once a week cover this story.